In Cedar Hollow, information was more valuable than gold. Leonora Vale understood that better than anyone. Her general store stood at the center of town, its wide front windows displaying bolts of fabric, sacks of flour, jars of molasses, and the finest imported tea this side of the territory. But those goods were only part of her inventory. The real trade happened between the shelves, beneath the steady chime of the brass bell above the door. People talked when they felt comfortable, and everyone felt comfortable around Leonora. She had a way of nodding at the right moment, of widening her gray eyes just slightly, of leaning forward as though every word spoken mattered deeply to her. Ranchers' wives confided financial worries. Cowboys grumbled about unpaid wages. The sheriff muttered about disputes. Even the banker, puffed up with importance, sometimes revealed more than he intended while purchasing cigars. Leonora never repeated information carelessly. That would be foolish. She stored it, organized it, weighed it. A secret about a failing ranch might ensure a future discount agreement. Knowledge of a quiet engagement could prevent a public embarrassment. Awareness of a feud might help her avoid stocking certain brands of whiskey before Saturday nights. Information was leverage. Leverage was protection. And in a town where a woman owned property alone, protection was survival. The day Gabriel arrived, the wind carried dust, thick as smoke, through Cedar Hollow. The sky burned pale and unforgiving. Leonora was reorganizing a display of canned peaches when the bell chimed. She looked up automatically, smile prepared. The man who stepped inside did not belong to the dust. He moved with calm deliberation, closing the door gently behind him. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark traveling clothes that were clean but worn by distance. His boots were dusty, yet polished beneath the grit, as though he cared about details. Most strangers entered towns like Cedar Hollow, loudly seeking attention or trying to avoid it. This man did neither. "Afternoon," Leonora greeted smoothly. "Afternoon, ma'am," he replied. His voice was steady, low, controlled. She noticed his eyes first dark and observant, not roaming idly, but assessing, counting exits, measuring the room. "Interesting. What can I help you find?" she asked. "Coffee, dried meat, ammunition, if you have it. Practical. No unnecessary purchases. A man planning to stay prepared." She gathered the items with graceful efficiency. Passing through, she asked lightly, as if merely filling silence. "For now." Not quite an answer. "And where might you be headed?" "Where the road leads." Leonora smiled faintly. A man who answered questions without answering them. She wrapped the coffee in brown paper. "We don't often see new faces unless they're looking for land or trouble." "And which do you think I'm looking for?" he asked. There it was, a test. Leonora met his gaze without flinching. "I never assume." A corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. He placed exact coins on the counter. No hesitation. No overpayment. No attempt at charm. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Gabriel." No last name offered. She waited a breath longer than polite. He did not elaborate. "Well, Gabriel," she said smoothly, sliding the parcel toward him. "Cedar Hollow tends to reveal itself in time." "I'm counting on that," he replied. The words were simple, but something in his tone made her pulse tighten. P left quietly. The bell chimed once. Leonora stood still for a moment. After the door closed, she replayed the conversation in her mind, searching for clues: accent, posture, phrasing. He wasn't a drifter, not a gambler, not law enforcement, at least not obviously. He had the bearing of someone accustomed to watching. What? By evening, Mrs. Dillard came in to gossip about the bank extending unusual loans. The blacksmith mentioned someone asking about property boundaries. The sheriff complained about missing records from last winter. Leonora listened carefully. A thread began forming. The next morning, Gabriel returned, and the morning after that. Each visit was brief, each conversation restrained. But every time he stepped inside her store, Leonora felt something unfamiliar. She was not the only one gathering information, and for the first time in years, someone in Cedar Hollow might be weighing her just as carefully as she weighed everyone else. Secrets had always been her currency. But she had the uneasy feeling that Gabriel carried secrets far more expensive than her own. And if she misjudged their value, it could cost her everything. Gabriel did not behave like other men in Cedar Hollow. Most newcomers announced themselves one way or another. They bragged at the saloon, flirted boldly, or asked direct questions about land and opportunity. Gabriel did none of those things. Instead, he blended into the edges of the town, as though he preferred the outline of things, rather than the center. Leonora noticed, because noticing was her talent. He visited her shop every other day now, never at the same hour. Sometimes early, when the morning sun filtered pale and golden through her front windows. Sometimes just before closing, when shadows stretched long across the wooden floorboards. He bought small, sensible items: lamp, oil, thread for mending, tobacco, paper. Nothing extravagant, nothing careless. But he listened. That was what unsettled her. While Mrs. Dillard whispered about the bank tightening credit, Gabriel would stand near the shelves, appearing indifferent. When two ranch hands argued about grazing rights, he would adjust his purchase slowly, head tilted ever so slightly. He never interrupted, never asked for clarification. Yet Leonora sensed he absorbed every word. One afternoon, when the shop was empty save for the two of them, she decided to shift tactics. "You're a patient man," she said casually, stacking jars behind the counter. "I've had reason to be," he replied. "That sounds like experience." Speaking, "It is." She leaned against the counter, studying him openly now. "Cedar Hollow isn't much of a destination, not unless someone has business here." "Everyone has business somewhere," he said. "Yes," she agreed softly, "but not everyone admits it." He met her gaze steadily. "You ask a great many questions for someone who claims not to assume." The observation was gentle but precise. Leonora smiled faintly. Curiosity keeps a shopkeeper informed. About prices, about people. A pause lingered between them. Gabriel removed his gloves slowly. His hands bore faint scars, not from ranch work alone. There was a carefulness in the way he moved, like a man trained to observe before acting. "And what have you learned about me?" he asked. Ah, there it was again. Another test. "Very little," she admitted. "Which makes you unusual. Is that troubling?" "It depends," she said lightly. "Should it be?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the counter, lowering his voice slightly. "Has anyone in town mentioned missing land records?" he asked. Leonora's fingers stilled on a jar lid. The question was not casual. "I hear many things," she said carefully. "Why?" "Because property disputes don't happen by accident." Her pulse ticked faster. She had heard the rumors, ranchers who swore they'd signed one agreement, only to find another filed at the bank, claims shifting hands quietly, debts appearing unexpectedly. She had filed those whispers away as leverage. Gabriel, however, was assembling them into something else. "Are you accusing someone?" she asked. "I'm asking whether you've noticed a pattern." He wasn't fishing blindly. He was confirming. Leonora realized something then. Gabriel wasn't interested in gossip for entertainment or manipulation. He was searching for structure within it. He was building a case. "And if there were a pattern," she asked, "then someone is profiting from confusion." A chill moved through her. The bank manager, Mr. Hollis, had grown noticeably wealthier over the past year. New suits, imported cigars, subtle arrogance. Leonora had noticed, but noticing and acting were different matters. "Careful," she said quietly. "Accusations can collapse a town, so can corruption." His eyes held conviction, not anger, not greed, determination. For the first time, Leonora felt a flicker of uncertainty about her own position. Secrets, to her, were currency. They ensured stability, balance, advantage. But to Gabriel, secrets were obstacles. Later that evening, after he left, she pulled out her private ledger. Not the one with accounts and invoices, but the slim leather book, hidden beneath the false drawer in her desk. Inside were coded notes, dates of disputes, overheard conversations, unusual transactions. She had always recorded them for protection. Now, she wondered if they might become evidence. The following morning, the sheriff stopped by, muttering about misplaced documents. By afternoon, Mrs. Dillard complained that her cousin's ranch boundary had mysteriously shifted. The pattern sharpened, and each time Gabriel stepped through her door, Leonora felt the balance of power tilt slightly. For years, she had been the quiet collector of Cedar Hollow's secrets. Now, she faced a man who collected them for a different purpose entirely, and she had yet to decide whether that made him a threat. For an ally, she could not afford to lose. By the time the first rancher rode into town, waving a contested deed, Cedar Hollow was already trembling. Leonora felt it in the way customers lowered their voices, in the way conversations stopped when the bank manager's name was mentioned, in the sharp glances cast toward the sheriff's office. And she felt it most when Gabriel stepped into her store that afternoon, carrying dust on his coat and purpose in his stride. The bell chimed. He removed his hat slowly. "It's happening faster than I expected." Leonora kept her expression calm. 3 land claims were altered in the county filing system. Same handwriting adjustment. Same ink. Her hands tightened slightly around the pencil she held. "That sounds like official business. It sounds like fraud." The word lingered between them. Leonora glanced toward the window to ensure no one lingered outside. The street was nearly empty, the heat pressing most townsfolk indoors. "You're certain?" she asked quietly. "I've compared copies from neighboring towns. Cedar Hollow is the only place with discrepancies." Her heartbeat quickened. She had suspected something irregular for months. Loans issued hastily, properties transferred unusually quickly. But suspicion was not proof, and proof was dangerous. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you know things," Gabriel replied simply. The directness startled her. "I run a shop. You run the center of this town." Their eyes locked. "You hear what others don't," he continued. "You remember what others forget." Leonora's breath slowed. "And what would you have me do with that?" "Help me confirm it." There it was, a choice. For years, she had gathered secrets to protect herself. As a single woman owning property, influence had been her shield. Information had ensured no one underestimated her. No one cornered her. But Gabriel wasn't asking for leverage. He was asking for justice. "Do you understand what happens if this explodes?" she asked. "The bank funds half the ranches. If trust collapses, so does Cedar Hollow. And if the bank is stealing land," he countered, "then the collapse is already underway." Silence stretched between them. Leonora turned away and walked toward the back office. Gabriel did not follow. He waited. She paused before her desk. For years, she had guarded the hidden ledger beneath the false drawer. Record of conversations, dates, patterns, nothing illegal, nothing fabricated. Simply observations too valuable to forget. Her protection. If she revealed it, she would no longer be the silent observer. She would become involved. And involvement meant risk. She closed her eyes briefly. When she returned to the front counter, she carried the slim leather book in her hands. Gabriel's gaze dropped to it immediately. "I don't give this lightly," she said firmly. "I wouldn't expect you to." She opened it to marked pages. "Last spring," she began, "Mr. Dillard mentioned renegotiating his loan. 2 weeks later, his interest rate increased, without explanation." She flipped another page. "Mrs. Calder signed grazing rights renewal papers. 3 months later, her boundary shifted east by 20 acres. Gabriel listened carefully, not interrupting. "And here," she said, tapping a line, "Mr. Hollis met privately with the county clerk on the same day 3 deeds were revised." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "This is more than rumor," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied, "it is." He looked at her then, not as a shopkeeper, not as a source, but as a partner in something larger. "Why keep records?" he asked. "Because I learned early that information keeps you safe. And now," she hesitated, "now I'm not sure it has." Outside, distant thunder rolled across the plains, though the sky remained cloudless. Gabriel closed the ledger gently. "If we present this properly, the town will listen, or they'll turn on us." "They won't turn on you," he said. The certainty in his voice unsettled her, More than doubt would have. You don't know that. I know character. A warmth flickered unexpectedly in her chest. Dangerous warmth. You're asking me to gamble everything I've built, she said softly. I'm asking you to decide what kind of town you want to live in. His words struck deeper than she anticipated. Cedar Hollow had been good to Herb only because she had learned to navigate its flaws. Was survival enough, or did she want fairness? Gabriel reached for the ledger, but paused before touching it. Only if you're certain, he said. She looked at the book, then at him. For the first time, she felt the weight of secrets, not as power, but as responsibility. Slowly, deliberately, she placed the ledger into his hands. I'm certain, she said. The moment felt irreversible, and as thunder rumbled again in the distance, Leonora realized something profound. She was no longer trading in secrets. She was risking them. The storm broke the following morning, not from the sky, but from the courthouse steps. Word spread quickly that Gabriel had requested a formal review of the bank's land filings. Ranchers gathered in tight clusters outside the sheriff's office, hats pulled low, tension riding heavy in the air. The wooden boardwalk creaked under restless boots. Whispers traveled faster than wind. Leonora stood inside her shop, watching through the window. This was the moment she had feared and chosen. Gabriel had worked through the night, comparing records, matching her ledger against official filings. The evidence was not rumor, it was ink and paper. Altered signatures, adjusted acre counts, loan terms rewritten in fine print. But evidence meant little without courage. She closed the shop early. When Leonora stepped onto the street, heads turned. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She was known for neutrality, for standing just outside disputes. Not today. Gabriel stood near the courthouse doors, composed but alert. When he saw her approach, something softened briefly in his expression. The bank manager, Mr. Hollis, emerged. Moments later, red-faced and indignant. This is slander, Hollis barked. Fabricated nonsense, stirred up by an outsider. Gabriel remained steady. Then the records will clear you. They've already been reviewed. Not thoroughly. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably between them. Let's keep this orderly. Leonora stepped forward before doubt could settle in her bones. I have documentation, she said clearly. The street fell silent. Hollis's gaze snapped toward her. Miss Vale, surely you're not entertaining this foolishness. She met his stare without blinking. I keep detailed records of transactions discussed in my store. You keep gossip, he sneered. I keep dates, she corrected calmly. Dates that align with changes in official deeds. A rancher stepped forward. My boundary shifted last winter. And mine, another added. Gabriel opened the ledger and handed copies of the altered filings to the sheriff. You'll find 3 deeds revised on the same afternoon, Gabriel said. And each benefits the bank. Hollis's confidence faltered just slightly. The sheriff examined the documents, brow furrowing. This doesn't match the original filings. It matches profit, Gabriel replied. Anger surged through the crowd. Voices rose. Accusations flew. Leonora felt the ground tilt beneath her certainty. This was what she had feared. Quiet, the sheriff shouted. I'll review every claim, personally. Until then, Mr. Hollis will remain under investigation. Hollis sputtered. You can't be serious. I am, the sheriff said grimly. 2 deputies stepped closer to the banker. The crowd parted as Hollis was escorted back inside. The storm had broken, but storms left damage behind. As townsfolk dispersed in unsettled groups, Leonora felt eyes on her, curious, wary, grateful. Mrs. Dillard approached first. You knew, she whispered. I suspected, Leonora replied. And you spoke anyway? Yes. The woman squeezed her hand briefly before walking away. Gabriel joined her once the street thinned. You were braver than most men here today, he said quietly. I was terrified, she admitted. Courage and fear often travel together. She exhaled slowly. What happens now? An audit. Restored deeds. Possibly charges. In the town, it will heal. She studied him. You sound certain. I've seen worse. That caught her attention. Where? He hesitated, then answered, I investigate corruption in frontier towns. Cedar Hollow wasn't the first, and after this, he looked toward the horizon briefly. There are always other towns. The words landed heavier than she expected. You'll leave, she said softly. I will, he admitted. Eventually, the certainty of it stirred something unwelcome in her chest. For years, Leonora had kept emotional distance, as carefully as financial records. Attachments complicated strategy. Yet standing beside Gabriel, watching the town reckon with truth, she felt something shift. You've changed, Cedar Hollow, she said. No, he corrected gently. You did. I only followed the evidence. She gave a faint smile. You asked for it, and you chose to give it. The weight of that choice lingered. As evening settled, lanterns flickered to life along the street. The town felt different, not broken, but exposed. Secrets no longer hid safely behind polished counters and locked drawers. They stood in daylight now. Leonora looked at her shop, then at Gabriel. For the first time, she said quietly, I don't know what role I play. He regarded her thoughtfully. Maybe not a collector anymore. Then what? A guardian. The word settled into her heart with unexpected warmth. And as the sky darkened above Cedar Hollow, Leonora realized something she had not anticipated. Letting go of secrets did not weaken her. It freed her. Cedar Hollow did not fall apart. It shifted. The investigation took weeks. The sheriff combed through filings with a patience no one had known he possessed. Ranchers rode in and out of town daily, reclaiming deeds that had quietly slipped from their hands. Mr. Hollis, once polished and proud, now sat under formal charges, his influence reduced to bitter silence. Through it all, Leonora kept her shop open. The bell still chimed. The floorboards still creaked. Coffee still sold by the pound. But something fundamental had changed. Customers no longer whispered quite so cautiously in her presence. There was still conversation. There would always be conversation. But the tone felt different. Less transactional. More honest. Mrs. Calder came in one morning and clasped Leonora's hands across the counter. You saved my ranch, she said plainly. Leonora shook her head. I provided records. You provided courage. The word lingered long after Mrs. Calder left. Courage. Leonora had once believed courage belonged to men who carried guns or rode into danger. She had built her strength differently, through observation, calculation, preparation. Yet standing beside Gabriel that day on the courthouse steps had required something no ledger could measure: trust. Gabriel remained in town longer than expected. He assisted the sheriff in organizing new filing safeguards. He met with ranchers, explaining their rights patiently. He did not seek praise. In fact, he avoided it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the storefront gold, Leonora found him repairing the loose hinge on her back gate. You don't work for me, she said lightly. He glanced over his shoulder. I noticed it sagging and decided to fix it. He shrugged. Seemed worth doing. She studied him quietly. You're not like other men who pass through, she said. I've gathered that passing through is what you expect. It's what usually happens. He wiped his hands and leaned against the fence. And if I told you, I'm reconsidering that pattern. Her pulse stumbled. Your work, she asked. There will always be work. Corruption doesn't disappear. No, she agreed softly. It only hides. And sometimes, he continued, it's enough to know one town stands a little straighter. Cedar Hollow did feel straighter, lighter, as though the air itself had cleared. Leonora folded her arms loosely. You came here looking for truth. I did. Did you find it? Yes. She tilted her head slightly. In the records, he met her gaze steadily. In you. The words were not dramatic. They were simple, honest, more valuable than any secret she had ever stored. For years, Leonora had guarded herself carefully. Knowledge had been her armor. If she knew more than others, she could not be blindsided. If she held leverage, she could not be cornered. But love did not operate by leverage. Love required exposure. I used to think secrets were safety, she admitted. That if I knew everything, nothing could hurt me. And now, he asked gently, now, I think silence can hurt more. He stepped closer, not crowding her, but near enough that she could feel the steady presence of him. "You don't have to trade in secrets to be strong," he said. "I know that now." "And what will you trade in instead?" She considered the question carefully. "Fairness," she answered. "Clarity, and perhaps partnership." A faint smile touched his mouth. "That sounds like a worthwhile business." She laughed softly, surprised at how natural it felt. "Are you staying?" she asked finally. He did not hesitate this time.
Yes.
Not for a case. Not for a temporary duty. For her. The bell inside the shop chimed as a customer entered. Life continuing. Always continuing. Leonora glanced toward the door, then back at Gabriel. "Then we should get to work," she said. "On the shop, on the town." He offered his arm not as a gesture of possession, but of unity. She took it. For the first time, Leonora understood something deeper than leverage, deeper than information, deeper even than influence. The most valuable trade she would ever make was not exchanging whispers for advantage. It was exchanging fear for trust. And that was a bargain she would choose every day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.